Everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching the Indian Express analysis for 14th of February. So I'll wish you a very happy Valentine's Day. Now, Valentine's Day should be put away. Right now, our focus should be on analysis of newspaper that we put every day without fail, and even we give you important practice questions for prelims as well as mains, so as to inculcate the habit of answer writing and solving the problems on a daily basis. Now, give me a minute. Yeah. Now, as I was saying, today is 14th of February and we'll be discussing 6 important articles for today. And if you like this session, please do not forget to give us a thumbs up, as it helps us keep motivated and also helps our content reach more aspirants like you. Now, this article or these 6 articles, they appeared in various pages of today's newspaper. First of all, was a very brilliant article in today's newspaper demonstrating the benefits of space technology or how these technologies can be applied in our day-to-day lives. Hence, we'll be discussing how ISRO is technology or it's transferring its technologies to India's private sector in various different fields, so as these technologies can be used for different gadgets, and these gadgets, they are very helpful in our day-to-day life. So we'll try to understand this. Now, awareness related to space is a part of GS paper 3 syllabus, so we'll be discussing this article from GS paper 3 perspective. Also, what we have seen that various important technologies and their applications, questions related to these aspects have been asked in prelims before. Because if you can recall, in 2020, there was this question on applications of artificial intelligence. So similarly, you can expect questions on space technologies or how they find applications in our day-to-day life similarly, right? Then we'll be discussing free movement regime, as the government of India, it has actually made this regime much more stricter, especially because there are disturbances that are going on in the northeast part of the country. Now, this free movement regime is a regime which allows people living close to Indo-Myanmar border to transfers from one country to another without the need of having passport, right? So we'll try to understand what is this free movement regime and how has government made this regime much more stricter in nature. And this is important for GS paper 3 perspective because it deals with matters related to internal security, right? Then we'll be discussing removal of a High Court judge, because this news was in article or this news was in newspaper because there was a proposal made by many members of Rajya Sabha to remove a judge of High Court of Allahabad because he made some controversial comments. Now, what were those controversial comments? Not important for our exam, but what is important is actually the process and procedure on how we can remove a judge in High Court or Supreme Court. So we'll try to understand this, as this subject is important from polity perspective and it is a part of naturally GS paper 2 syllabus, as GS paper 2 also highlights structure and functioning of Indian judiciary. So you can understand removal of a judge is also part of functioning of judiciary. Then we'll be discussing aspects of India's trade with US, and this article appeared because there are fears that President Trump will impose reciprocal tariffs on India also. So in that light, how India's trade with US currently is, what are the various important materials that are both exported out of India and imported to India? We'll try to understand that with the perspective of Indo-US trade. Also, we'll be understanding the various important highlights of what the government has done in order to reduce such tariffs which are imposed on goods imported from other countries. Understood? Then we'll be understanding about sovereign green bonds, because there was this article in the business section of the Indian Express newspaper that told us that although government is issuing these sovereign green bonds, however, the demand in the market is not so high, and that is why many issues have not been led to people buying these bonds from the government. So what are these actually sovereign green bonds and why are they not in high demand in the market? We'll try to understand all of this. This is important from GS paper 3 perspective, as it deals with mobilization of resources. Also, this one also was a part of GS paper 3 syllabus, as it deals with India's external sector. External sector involves India's trade with other countries like US, right? Then in the end, we'll be discussing Trump and Putin talks, as Trump made an approach towards Putin by calling him on the phone, and this can create changes in the global order. So how these changes in global order will impact India, or does it provide India an opportunity to demonstrate its increased heft in the global affairs? We'll try to understand this in our today's discussion in detail, right? So these are the 6 articles that I will be covering. Good morning Sejal, good morning Shalini, good morning Augustine, Sandeep, Kesaria, good morning Shah, Good morning, Kusum. Yashi, good morning. How are you, sir? I'm good, Yashi. How are you doing? Good morning, Travel with Sumant. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all in the morning. Now, as usual, this notes for this session will be available on my Telegram channel called as ATS Live. So you can search the keywords ATS Live on the top right hand corner of the mobile app, or also you can scan this QR code which will take you directly to my Telegram channel. Now also I upload important reels which are very informative and also are important for your UPSC's perspective, and I do so on my Instagram channel called as ANKTSNGH. So if you aren't able to find this Instagram channel, here's the QR code which you can scan. It will take you directly to the Instagram channel that I have. Now, an announcement I need to make that from tomorrow onwards, that is 15th of February, our session will go live on 4 p.m. every day instead of this 10 a.m. slot, because I have other teaching commitments here at StudyIQ which wants me to shift this particular session to 4 a.m. So everything will be same, just this session will go live instead of 10 a.m. at 4 p.m. on a daily basis, right? So please, from tomorrow onwards, do tune in to this very channel at 4 a.m. if you want to watch this session. Understood? Now, let us start our today's discussion with yesterday's practice question that I gave you, and this practice question is drafted on a very similar question that appeared in the 2021 prelims. That 2021 PYQ was on copper smelting plants and what are its negative effects on the climate and environment. Similarly, I have curated this question on how or what are the concerns related to leather tanneries. Okay, so let us see whether we are able to solve this question or not. These leather tanneries, they may release toxic chromium compounds into the environment. We understood hexachromium was released into the atmosphere or into the environment by these leather tanneries, which creates all sorts of problems. Therefore, first option is right. The effluents from tanneries can cause contamination of water bodies with heavy metals. Again correct. The tanneries, it may contribute to lead pollution which can accumulate in soil and water, posing serious health risk. Yes, again correct. All of these three were discussed in detail in yesterday's session. If you are unable to recall, after the session ends, please do watch that particular video. Okay, so all these three statements are correct. We had to identify correct answer. Therefore, option D here is the right answer. All three are correct. Now let us start our today's discussion with this first article of the day that appeared on page 14 of the Indian Express newspaper, and if you can see, this highlights that many technologies that are developed by spacefaring organizations like NASA, ISRO, they have trickled down into our daily lives, and we don't even know that these were originally developed for space applications. So that is why many questions or many people ask, why is India for that matter spending so much on space when it has other priorities like health, education, etc. So this is your answer, that these technologies not just help India to reach other exoplanets and other parts of the universe, but these technologies that have been developed for space related applications can also be used for our day-to-day applications, gadgets, etc. Right? So let us understand this. Now there's this body called as Indian National Space Promotional and Organization Center, known as INSpace. Now this is an independent body which functions under the Department of Space, which is a part of Government of India, and the intention of creation of this body was to regulate and promote projects, especially with relation to private sector industry. So whenever a technology is developed by ISRO, INSpace lends it to private sector so that private sector can apply these technologies and manufacture goods and services based on this technology. Now it has identified 166 technologies that were developed by ISRO's mission, and it can be shared with industry so that they can be utilized for other purposes. As some materials and sensor, they are already in use. However, newer technologies can also be developed with the help of startups so as to make our day-to-day lives better. Now, what are these technologies? For example, NASA, you understand, is US's space agency, and this has created many developments into the space sector. Also, similarly, ISRO wants to do the same with respect to India. So far, so that ISRO has signed 79 Memorandum of Understanding or MOUs with private companies so as to transfer these technologies to private companies. Now, you have to realize these transfer of technologies are non-exclusive. That means ISRO can transfer these technologies or one technology to more than one companies, and that these are non-exclusive, whereas these intellectual property rights of these technologies will remain with ISRO. That is, ISRO will be the owner of the technology. However, private companies will develop these technologies into our day-to-day life applications, right? So please make sure to understand these are all non-exclusive deals, and also it allows ISRO to share one technology with more than one companies, that is multiple companies. Now let us understand about technologies. Now many daily use items like our cell phones, air purifier, memory foam mattresses, reflective banklets, which are used in emergency purposes, they were originally developed for space-based application by the agency of US, that is NASA. Similarly, as I told you, ISRO has many technologies. For example, the camera software as well as algorithm that was used in Chandrayaan-3 mission, it can technically be used in automobiles. For example, today's automobile, they have a system called as ADAS system. These ADAS system are an autonomous system which has cameras, and these cameras, they take pictures of everything that is going around in the car. So for example, there is a person who is moving in front of the car and the person does not apply the brake. These ADAS system will warn the driver so as to apply the brake in case you want to prevent the collision. And sometimes these advanced ADAS systems have become so advanced that they will automatically apply the brakes in the car. Also, these ADAS systems have camera which take or which analyze the movement of drivers, and if the camera feels that the driver is falling asleep, they will raise an alarm so as to wake up the driver. Understood? So this is how ADAS system in the vehicles, they are used in various kind of applications, primarily to prevent vehicular collisions. And these original softwares, algorithms, cameras, these were primarily developed for Chandrayaan-3 mission. Whereas many space missions, they have pressure sensors in the rockets. As these pressure sensors, they analyze if the gas out of these rockets are leaking out or not. Similarly, these pressure sensors can also be used in automobiles. For example, automobiles have airbags which helps you in cases of collision so as to prevent the impact or damage to human body. So these pressure sensors can be embedded in the car so as to warn or to let these airbags open in cases of collision. Understood? So this is how these technologies that were originally developed for space can be used for automobile industry. Similarly, there is a radar based technology called as LIDAR, or light imaging detection and ranging camera. Now these cameras, what they do is they analyze the nearby objects, and by understanding the reflection of light from these objects, they understand the depth effect. So technically, these softwares or these cameras can be modeled to detect and count number of people in heavily crowded space. It can also measure parcels in delivery warehouses, especially those parcels from Amazon and Flipkart which are delivered to you and me on a daily basis. So the flow of these parcels can also be tracked effectively by these companies, and it will do away with the need of hiring manual labor. Also, this technology provides near terrain flight assistance to helicopters. In case these helicopters come very near to the land, if there is an obstruction in front of them, they will be warned before. Also, these can be used in medical applications like measuring body and its measurements like waist size, hip size, etc., which can help medical professionals understand if a person is obese or not. Similarly, these are used in home devices for understanding gesture recognition in cell phones, also in gaming platforms. Suppose in cell phones there is a proximity sensor, so as soon as we bring our cell phones near to our head, the screen goes off, and this is done only through these kind of radar imaging technologies, as the camera analyzes that the phone is being brought closer to the body and hence the screen shuts off while the camera or phone is still working. Okay, so this is how LIDAR technology can be used to improve the functioning of our day-to-day life. Also, ISRO has developed lithium-ion batteries, and you understand these lithium-ion batteries, they are used extensively in wireless gadgets, even in cars. So when ISRO will transfer its own proprietary lithium-ion technology to Indian companies will be able to manufacture their own lithium-ion technology or batteries based on the ISRO's technology at much cheaper price. And also it can promote development of electric vehicles in India. It can promote cheaper manufacturing of mobile phones, wireless devices. Similarly, the technology or space organizations, they have a vibration management system. As you can understand, whenever the rocket takes off, there is a huge vibration in the entire body of the rocket, which can also lead to vibrations in the technologies or satellites that are being sent on board these rockets. So as to prevent vibration from damaging the components of satellites or the payloads in space, these agencies, they use a vibration management system which can in day-to-day life be used in seismic isolation so as to prevent buildings from being damaged by earthquakes, and they can also be used in applications such as air transport, vehicular transport, which can also lead to significant vibration. So as to prevent damage to people and goods that are being transported, we can utilize these vibrant or vibration management system. Understand? Good morning, Sneha. Miss Shalini, note making of current affairs is important. Yes, technically yes, but you do not need to make the notes separately. Please download these notes and use them for your notes itself. That will be the complete work done. K. Saria sir, will you be teaching in our paid batch? Yes, I will be teaching. I will be teaching economics. Now, there are many paints, coatings and polymers that have also been developed by ISRO. These paints and coatings, primarily a coating called as NRCM 204, it is actually a coating that is made on a surface to make them prevent the corrosion resistance. Now, any coating on a surface, if the surface is exposed, that surface will be prone to corrosion and resistance. So as to prevent them surface to catch rust, we use these kind of coatings, which can also be used to protect metals, composites from all types of corrosion, even in our day-to-day lives. Also, ISRO has a benzoxanine polymer which can be encapsulated in electronic device so as to make them heat resistant and also fire retardant. So especially those gadgets that are prone to catch fire, that has high temperature, these gadgets can be used by benzoxin polymer that will make them fire retardant and also be able to absorb heat in much higher quantities. Understood? So all of these are technologies that were primarily developed for the space sector, but now these technologies can be also be used in our day-to-day life applications, and that is why ISRO is trying to transfer these technologies to India's private sector, and this will be available to most of the companies in India, and hence they can manufacture much of these high-tech items at a much cheaper price. Understood? Now let us move to another article. This article appeared on page 9 of the Indian Express newspaper, and it talks about that Assam Rifles, which is a centrally armed police force responsible for protecting the borders between India and Myanmar, it is trying to collect biometrics of 7,000 Manipur residents who were crossing the border from Myanmar into India. Now, why were they collecting biometrics? Because free movement regime is an application, and recently government made changes to this free movement regime. So the context of this article was that earlier last year, Union Home Minister Mr. Amit Shah, he announced that the free movement regime will be scrapped or it will be ended. But this announcement met with several resistance in civil society organizations and also in political authorities of the northeastern part of the country. So recognizing the importance of free movement regime, the Union Home Ministry said that will not scrap this free movement regime, rather will make this regime much more stricter in application so that we can control the amount of people moving between these two countries and understand even if there is some kind of separatist that is moving along. So for that, the regime was made stricter. Earlier, people living 16 kilometers across both of the borders, they were able to move into each other country without the need of passport. However, now it was reduced to just 10 kilometers. Understood? So this was the context of our today's discussion. Now, what is actually a free movement regime, if you may ask? This free movement regime is a mutually agreed agreement between India and Myanmar that allows people living close to Indo-Myanmarese border, primarily the tribal people, to move along the border into another country without the need of having passport. Now, earlier they could travel up to 16 kilometers inside the territory of another country, but now, as I have told you, this has been rationalized to just 10 kilometers. Now, this was originally implemented in 2018 as a part of Narendra Modi government's Act East policy. As Act East policy by Government of India, it wanted India's close relation with Southeast Asian nations like Thailand, Myanmar, Indonesia, etc. Right. Now, this was the year at the time when relations between India and Myanmar was quite good, as Myanmar at that time, it was ruled by a democratically elected government. But now you understand, instead of democratically elected government, Myanmar is ruled by a military dictatorship known as junta. So that is why we need to control the amount of people moving across these two countries, and that is why government has amended this regulations for free market regime. Now, this free market regime originally came into existence back in 1968, and that time along 40 kilometers between the two nations, people were allowed to move. However, this was subsequently reduced to 16 kilometers back in 2004 and additional regulations were enforced in 2016. Now, the new regulations that were brought in late 2024, that is December 2024, it further nationalized this free market regime or free movement regime. Now, according to new guidelines, if any resident of Myanmar, if they want to cross into India, they have to provide their identity, they have to provide their photograph, and they also have to provide their fingerprints or biometrics. Now, this will be taken by the Assam Rifles, which is the border guarding agency of India, responsible for guarding Indo-Myanmar border. And after they take identification documents, biometrics, etc., the Assam Rifles, they will issue a border pass to these people, and only those people who have border passes will be allowed to cross into India. And they can stay in India for a sum total of 7 days, and they can only move along within 10 kilometers of the Indo-Myanmar border. So, this is how the regulations were made stricter. As I told you earlier, the distance with which people were able to move before 2024 was 16 kilometers. This was reduced to 10 kilometers now. Now, this free movement regime is in application in all the states that share its boundary with Myanmar. So, from this map you can see Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur as well as Mizoram, they share their boundary with Myanmar, whereas states like Assam, Meghalaya, Sikkim, they don't share boundaries with Myanmar. So, please pay close attention to this map, as important locations and India's border with many countries or the states which are located in border, they have been asked in prelims before, right? Now, India shares a 1643 kilometer long with Myanmar, and these border is located into 4 states, as I have already told you: Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur as well as Mizoram. Now, why there was originally a need for free movement regime? Because we do not have such regimes with Pakistan, with China, with Nepal, etc. So, why do people crossing into border from India and Myanmar, especially living in close quarters, they are not requiring any kind of passport? The original intention was that this border, it was delineated back in the British era, and Britishers, they do not divided the border considering the ethnicities of people, rather they demarcated it quite artificially. Hence, what we saw, that people living across the border, that even villages, they came to be divided by these borders. As there is one village in Mon district in Nagaland, it is half of the village is located in India, whereas the rest half is located in Myanmar. So, that is why when people have close familial ties with people across the border, you need these people to be able to move freely along the border, and that is why the free movement regime was applied in the first place. Now, also, not just movement of people, this free movement regime also allows for trade to happen between these two countries, because this area, you can understand, is underdeveloped, especially the northeastern part of the country. So, these people who are primarily trading in agricultural commodities, they need to be able to sell their produce to many large number of people, right? And also, Myanmar's area is lesser developed even compared to India. So, Indian farmers and local people, they need to be sold their goods and services even to people living in Myanmar. So, that is why many border huts were constructed in the bordering areas, where people, they go to these border huts to sell their products, and people moving across the border, they come to these markets in order to buy goods and services. So, that is why this kind of a regime is very vital to the sustenance of local livelihood of the people. As I told you, these people live in a very low income economy, and as industrialization and modernization has not happened in the area, so that is why these people depend on these border huts to meet their day-to-day livelihood needs. And that is why for border people living in Myanmar too, they can move to India, they can seek educational services, healthcare services in India, which is provided in good numbers in India. That is why this also has an economic rationale rather than a cultural rationale. So, culturally, it enabled people living across the border who have close familial ties to move, and economically it also leads to development in the area. Understood? But there are demands from huge section of Indian society that India should instead scrap this free movement regime. And why is that? Because you understand, illegal migration which happens from Myanmar, it leads to several social tensions in India. Primarily, state of Manipur, it is witnessing ongoing conflict, particularly because an illegal tribal population of Kuki-Chin people, they have immigrated into India illegally from Myanmar, and this was only possible just because free movement regime was in application. Also, many of these people, they participate in insurgent activities and they build camps in border regions of Myanmar away from the Indian armed forces, and they engage in illegal activities such as smuggling of drugs, weapons, etc. And also they raise their funds so as to promote their insurgent activities in India. And all of this is possible only because the border between India and Myanmar, it is porous, and that is why we need to first of all scrap this free movement regime in order to curb the amount of insurgency that happens in the northeastern part of the country. Understood? Now let us solve this practice question. Which of the following Indian states they share their border with Myanmar? Am I audible? Yes. Which of these following states share their border with Myanmar? Arunachal Pradesh, yes it does. Nagaland it does. Manipur it does. Mizoram it does. Tripura it doesn't. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is right. We had to identify correct answer. Option A here is the right answer. Sejal Gupta, is this longest border sharing? No, actually India has the longest border with Bangladesh, which is more than 4,000 kilometers in length. Kesaria, you are right. Option A is right. Now, as I tell you every day, in case if you have problem in understanding key important topics that are explained in these analysis daily or even in the newspaper, you have an option to get your knowledge sorted out. And this is through the Sampoorn batch that is offered by the StudyIQ. Now, the Sampoorn batch, they have many benefits. Let me tell you these benefits one by one. First of all is that you will be provided with a 18 booklet material that will help you understand each and every static portion of the syllabus. Also, you will be provided classes for each and every subject by expert teachers on the subject matters, which will help you gain the foundational knowledge of the UPSC preparation. Also, you can test your learning with the help of prelims as well as mains test series, which are evaluated by expert evaluators, and also you will be provided with a 24/7 mentoring support in case you need any guidance or any help during your preparation phase. And all of this is available at StudyIQ website. If you click create an account first, click on explore courses here. And if you click on explore courses, the first two options is for Sampoorn batch 2026 and 2027. And suppose if you want to enroll yourself for 2026 batch. Now, if you click on that course, you will see that is now available at 36,249. But if I tell you, you can get discount even on this amount, will you agree with me? Yes, you can actually, because there must be a code flashing on the bottom half of your screen called as ATS Live. So click on buy now here. You have an option to add promo code. Now these promo code although are available, but they will provide you lesser discount. So if you enter a coupon code here called as ATS Live and apply this coupon, you see the course fees, it reduces from 36,249 to 28,999. So please click on this buy now and you will get the courses at a much discounted rate, that is discount of about 7,249 rupees, which is a huge amount. Now you need to be very cautious about how you spend money on various aspects, because this money was originally hard earned by your parents and also by you. That is why by using such kind of codes like ATS Live, you can get maximum discounts on our platform, which was already available at a much reasonable price, right? So please make sure to register for these courses, and let us move to another article of the day. This appeared in the Indian Express, page 8. Now this article actually highlights that an ongoing motion is applied in the Rajya Sabha of the House, and it demanded for removal of the Allahabad High Court justice. Now, why is actually the justice subjected to be removal? Because he made some controversial comment on the very platform of the High Court of Allahabad, and that complaint reached to the Supreme Court of India. However, many legislators in the Rajya Sabha, they also filed for removal of this particular judge. Now, what is the process and procedure of removal of a particular High Court judge? Let us try to understand this. Now, Constitution of India, particularly in Article 124, subsection 4, it deals with removal of judges of Supreme Court, whereas similarly Article 218, it deals with removal of judges of High Courts in India. Now, although these two are different judges, but the procedure of removal of these two High Court and Supreme Court judges, they are the same. First of all, these judges can only be removed on two grounds. First is proved misbehavior, and second one is called as incapacity. So you have to establish that the judge is culprit of these two actions, and then only you can remove a particular judge. Now, this judge is only removed after order of precedent is passed, and this is passed only after each houses of the parliament, that is both Raj Sabha and Lok Sabha, passes the address of motion by a majority or known as special majority. What is this special majority? It combines two different aspects: majority of total membership, that is more than 50% of total strength, and also not less than 2/3 of members present and voting, that is more than 2/3 of member present and voting. So, for example, there are 245 members in Raj Sabha. So, this requires that 50% of total strength, that is 123, and more than 2/3 present and voting. So, for example, at any given day, 100 people were present in Raj Sabha. So, 2/3 present and voting will mean 67 members. But can 67 members remove this particular judge just because it is more than 2/3 of present and voting? The answer will be no, because it is less than 123, which is 50% of the total membership. That is why you have to satisfy both these conditions if the order of removal of a particular judge needs to be passed by the both houses of parliament. Understood? Now, there is a process through which this entire procedure of removal or impeachment is governed, and this is laid down as per the provisions of Judges Inquiry Act 1968. Now, this act talks about that first this motion of removal or impeachment of a particular judge needs to be introduced in a particular house of parliament. For example, if it were to be introduced in Lok Sabha, then it requires permission of not less than 100 members, whereas if it were to be introduced in Raj Sabha, it requires permission of not less than 50 members. Now, after suppose this movement is this motion is admitted into any house of the Indian Parliament, then what happens that a 3-member committee on inquiry is constituted, which consists of Chief Justice of India or a judge of Supreme Court nominated by Chief Justice of India, Chief Justice of any High Court in India, and also a distinguished jurist. And this committee on inquiry, it first of all frames charges, seeks medical test, and investigates whether or not that judge is actually responsible for proven misbehavior or incapacity. Understood? Now, after this committee concludes its investigation, it submits the report to the presiding officer of the house, that is in case of Raj Sabha it is speaker, whereas in case of Lok Sabha it is speaker, whereas in case of Raj Sabha it is chairman or the vice president of India, and they place this particular report into the floor of the house. Now, suppose this report says that the judge is not guilty of proven misbehavior and incapacity, then this matter ends there itself and then no removal of judge will happen. But what if the report says that the judge is actually guilty of these offences? Then the report is adopted and the address begins on the removal, and then the voting process happens. Understood? So, voting comes in much later, only after the report is submitted into the floor of the house and it says that judge is actually guilty of the offences that has been alleged against him. Now, in total, since the time India got independent, there has been 6 attempts previous to that has been made to remove any particular judge, and out of these 6 attempts, 2 instances have been found that judge was actually guilty. But even then, no judge till now, both of High Court and Supreme Court, has been ever removed by Parliament of India. And the last impeachment process, it began on then CJI, that was Mr. Deepak Mishra. Understood? So, this is a very politically tough process, and that is why we see no judge has been impeached or removed from office till the time India has got independent. Now, let us solve this practice question. Happy Valentine's Day, Amar. Happy Valentine's Day to you too. Now, let us solve this practice question. With reference to impeachment of judges in India, consider the following statement. A judge of the Supreme Court or High Court can be removed from office by the President of India only on ground of corruption. Is the ground on corruption actually the particular way to remove a judge? The answer is no. It was 2 grounds: proven misbehavior as well as incapacity. And corruption is not given in the Constitution, therefore, first statement becomes incorrect. The process of impeachment requires a simple majority of the membership of both houses of the parliament. I told you this is incorrect. It requires special majority, that is more than 50% of total strength, as well as more than 2/3 of members present and voting. So, second statement also becomes incorrect. Moving to the third statement, the detailed procedure for impeachment of judges, it is governed by the Judges Inquiry Act 1968 in addition to the provision of the Constitution. I told you Article 214 etc. they provide for removal, hence third statement is right in addition to the Judges Inquiry Act. Now we have to identify, please pay close attention, which of the following statement given above is or are incorrect. So we have to identify incorrect statement. First and second was incorrect. Therefore, option A here is the right answer because it asks us to identify incorrect statement. Good morning, Saujanya. Good to see you after so long. Now moving to next article. This article appeared in the business page of the Indian Express newspaper, that is today on page 24. Now this article highlights that as Trump's meeting with Modi happened last night, it particularly raised the concerns of whether or not tariffs will be imposed by US on the imports currently done from India into US, right? So this highlights, or let us understand in this regard, what is the or how the trade between US and India happens. Now the context I told you that in order to prevent tariffs from being imposed on it, India wants to maintain market access of its important goods that are exported to US, because US is the destination where India exports its good into larger numbers. So naturally India want to continue exporting to US, and therefore it requires its good not to be imposed any additional tariff. And understanding that Trump might actually impose tariff, Indian government, particularly in this year's budget, reduce the amount of basic custom duty that it imposes on many imports in India. However, you understand further reductions in many tariffs are necessary just so that India can avert imposition of tariffs by US. Understood? So this is the context of this article. Now US exports to India, it reached to a level of $42 billion in the year of 2023-24, up from $35.81 billion in 2019-10. Now, bulk of this US exports into India, these are concentrated in 5 categories. The largest segment is of mineral fuels, which is followed by precious and semi-precious stones, nuclear reactors, electrical machinery, and also aircrafts and parts, because US is a major aircraft manufacturer and both civilian as well as military aircraft, these are imported from US into India. Now, while most of the items that are imported from US into India currently, they do not attract high tariffs. For example, duties on top 30 imported goods including crude oil, LNG, coal, diamonds, aeroplanes, they range just from 0 to 7.5%. However, on the other hand, high-end cars and motor vehicles or motorcycles, they have historically been subject to higher basic custom duty or tariffs in India. However, these rates, as I told you already, these were reduced in this year's union budget, understanding that Trump is actually very close to companies like Harley Davidson and he'd want India to remove tariffs on these imported cars and automobiles. Now, in automobile sector, India has actually lowered the tariffs on motorcycles based on engine capacity. If the engine of the motorcycle is less than 1600 cc, then the custom duty was reduced from 50% to 40%, whereas engines with capacity 1600 cc or more, the tariffs was reduced from 50 to 30%. Now, US motorcycle exports currently it stood just at about $3 million, which is very less in hindsight, but you have to understand motorcycle exports from US into India was a very close topic to US President Trump when he was first the President of United States, because at that time he highlighted that India imposes high tariff on high-end motorcycles like these Harley Davidson motorcycles, and hence Trump asked India to lower its tariff. Understood? So that is why India has reduced its tariff on motorcycles. Now, in terms of India's exports to US, India exports more goods to US than it imports from US, right? So that is why in terms of India's trade with US, India's trade with US is in surplus. That is, India exports more than it imports into US. Whereas with respect to US's trade with India is in deficit, right? That US imports more from India than it exports to India. Now, there is also notable shift in India's exports to US. Earlier, India used to export traditional items like gems, jewelry, garments, etc., but they remain unchanged. However, India's exports of electronics and engineering goods to US have actually surged, particularly this electronic goods, because US in first term of President Trump, they imposed high tariffs on electronic items which were imported into US from China. So naturally, many companies shifted their production to India, and that is why they started importing electronic goods from India to US. So that is why India's exports to US, particularly of electronics item, have increased, and this is highlighted in today's article. Now, this article also provides us with the necessary table. You have to understand that India's trade with US, it has not increased in the past 5 years in general. It has first decreased, then only increased, and in the last financial year, it reduced total amount. That is, blue line highlights India's exports to US, whereas India's import from US, whereas red highlights India's exports to US. And you can see India exports more than it imports, therefore, our trade is in surplus. Now, in terms of items which are imported and exported from US, in terms of imports from US, first is mineral fuels and oil, which constitute about close to $13 billion in exports. Further, precious, semi-precious stones, nuclear reactors, electrical machineries, and aircraft and parts. Whereas India's exports to US, the highest share is garnered by engineering goods, followed by electronic goods, gems and jewelry, drugs and pharmaceuticals, as well as petroleum products. So please remember these kind of data, as they can be asked in prelims, right? Now let us try to solve this practice question. Now, value of India-US trade has consistently increased in the last 5 years. Now, see from this graph, has it consistently increased in the 5 years? No, it reduced, then it increased, then further it reduced. So, you can't say it has continuously increased or decreased, because it has been zigzag, right? So, first statement here is incorrect. Please remember the trends. You do not have to remember the trends, but you have to remember discontinuity in the trend, right? Now, mineral fuels and oils constitute an important item of trade between India and US. It is right. Minerals and fuels and oil, these are the highest amount of imports into India from US. That is why these are an important commodity. Now, in the last 5 years, most significant transformation has occurred in electronics exports from India to US, right? Because US imposed tariffs on China, and many countries, they relocated their production from China into India, and that is why India's exports in terms of electronics item to US, it increased. So, third statement right. First is incorrect, second and third are correct. We have to identify correct statement. Therefore, option C here is the right answer. Good morning, Yashi. Yes, sir. Yashi, I don't know what you're saying yes about. Now, let us move to another article. This article also appeared in the business page of the Indian Express newspaper, and it states that sovereign green bonds, which are issued by governments, they have seen few demand or fewer takers. Now, the context of this article is that India's push, or India wants to undertake huge amount of green investments. So, for that, to get financing for these green projects, Indian government issues a bond known as sovereign green bonds. However, this sovereign green bond, they are facing muted investor demand. That is, their demand for these bonds in investors market is quite less. Although it provides of the evidence also, as Reserve Bank of India, it announced auction for 2 new sovereign green bonds for about 10,000 crore rupees in the months of November and January. However, only about 7,443 crores, they remained still, and they were unsold, and they were eventually devolved to the primary dealers, and the primary dealers highlighted that they want actually those bonds that have high yield or high returns. Rather, these bonds, instead of providing high returns, they are providing low returns. That is why they are in less demand. Now, this was despite a rule change allowing NRIs and foreign portfolio investors to participate without any restriction. Even then, India was not able to increase the demand for these sovereign green bonds. Now, first of all, let us understand what are these sovereign green bonds. These are a debt instrument which are issued by the Union government in order to fund green investments in India. Because you understand, India, like many other countries in the world, it is facing the brunt of climate change. So, in order to mitigate and adapt India to climate change, it regards or it considers many kind of investment as green investment, like investment in renewable energy, investment in undertaking development of forest and green cover. All of this requires money, and where the government will get money from these sovereign green bonds. Now, generally, these green bonds are offered at a premium price. That is, the usual interest rates that are prevailing in the market, these bonds are available at a higher interest rate. That is, people who will be investing in these bonds, they will be getting higher return. However, there is no higher amount of green premium, as we can see, or that are demanded in the market, as there are no significant green premium that is offered by the government. That is why there are no significant investment made by the investors in these kind of green bonds. Understood? Now, government, it typically uses the proceeds from the sovereign green bond into various kind of fields. For example, more than 50% of the proceeds that the government has gotten from these sovereign green bond, they have been used in manufacturing of three-phase electric locomotives that will be used to power trains by the Ministry of Railways. Also, these are used for renewable energy projects like promoting grid scale solar projects or undertaking national green hydrogen mission. Also, the government is using these proceeds to undertake developments of green cover under the National Mission for Green India, and also to undertake construction of metro projects, because these metro projects, they are eventually powered by electricity. Hence, they will be reducing the amount of greenhouse gas emissions from India's transportation sector, particularly in the urban areas, right? So, these are the areas in which the government invests the proceeds of green bonds. Now, why is actually these green bonds facing less demand? First of all, is that they are issued in very small sizes. And although the investors who invest in these green bonds, they are not looking to sell them until they mature. So, that is why people who are holding these green bonds, they are not able to sell them in the market, and also people who are looking to buy them from the open market, they are not able to buy it because there is no amount of liquidity in these kind of instruments. As people who are holding these instruments, they are not wanting to sell them, so how can any person buy it? Also, there is no natural buyer in India who is forced or who requires at least to buy these bonds, because India does not have any social impact funds, no responsible investing requirements, or it does not even have a sustainable financing market. So that is why no one is obligated to buy these instruments, and although they are paying some kind of premium, but these premium are very low, that is why their demand is further less. Also, people who have invested in these bonds, they are not looking to sell them before maturity. That is why people who want to buy them from secondary market, they are not able to buy them. Understood? Now, let us solve this question. Consider the following statements regarding sovereign green bonds. Now, these sovereign green bonds, they are issued by Government of India to raise capital exclusively for green projects. Yes, it is right. These are used exclusively for green projects, not for any other project. Now, the proceeds from these bonds can be used to fund both renewable energy projects and infrastructure projects related to fossil fuels. Now, fossil fuels, they are polluting sources like crude oil, like coal, etc. So, are these proceeds used for development of fossil fuels? No, these are just used for green sources like renewable energy. So, second statement becomes incorrect. First was right. We had to identify correct statement. Therefore, option A here is the right answer. Now, moving to the last article of the day. This article appeared on front page and also on the 12th page of the Indian Express newspaper, and this talks about one thing, that actually President Trump of US, he made a phone call to Putin requesting that Putin or Russia stops its war with Ukraine. Now, this development is huge, particularly at the time when Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in US and he is expected to meet Donald Trump. So, earlier most of India's media attention was that whether or not US President Trump will impose tariff in India. But the larger picture, according to today's article, is not a US imposition of tariffs on India, but rather what role can India play in rapprochement between India and Russia, between US and Russia, which has the potential to transform the global order. So, this article highlights that the big issue that India's Prime Minister is in US, that the role that India can play in order to bring US and Russia closer to each other, right? So, this is what today's article highlights. Now, why is that development of Trump calling Putin a big development, or why is it a watershed moment? First of all, you have to highlight, or you have to understand, that Russia is currently involved in a war with Ukraine since 2 or 3 years. Now, this war in Ukraine has created disruption across the globe, particularly because on one side there is US, Ukraine as well as Europe, and on the other side there are countries like Russia, which is actively supported by countries like China. So, this has created divide between these two countries, particularly divided the world in two halves. First is represented by West and the other is represented primarily by Russia and China. Now, by ending the war, what US wants to do is first of all reduce the amount of disruption and also to reshape the global power relation, because I told you, because of war, Russia has actually come closer to China, and both of these countries, they are antithetical to US. So, when Russia and China comes, it makes US much more uncomfortable, and naturally US would not want Russia and China to closely align with each other. So, that is why it is first of all trying to end the war in first place. Also, in the phone call, President Trump invoked the Yalta Conference. Now, Yalta Conference actually happened during the end of World War II, where British Prime Minister, US President and the ruler of Soviet Union, they got together and they decided upon that the cooperation of these major powers were necessary if the world needs to be better after the Cold War or after the World War II. So similarly, by invoking Yalta Conference, President Trump also highlighted that there is a need for renewed cooperation for global benefit between countries like US and Russia, primarily who are engaged in opposite side of the war between Russia and Ukraine. Now, President Trump also highlighted that both these leaders, Trump and Putin, they have a common sense approach, that they both want urgent conclusion of the war, and so that this war can reduce disruption across the globe. And by doing so, Trump has effectively ended over a decade of isolation that the Russia was facing just because of the Western powers like US, Ukraine, Europe, etc. So this in a way tries to bring US and Russia closer by ending the isolation of Russia, and also it tries to prevent Russia from getting too close to China. So you have to understand the bigger picture here, right? Now, the role of Europe in this kind of rapprochement is actually absent, because US, it actually rejects the idea that Ukraine first of all should become a NATO member, because this was the primary reason which was cited by Russia when it committed an aggression on Ukraine, because it considered Ukraine in its own sphere of influence, and by making Ukraine a member of NATO, it will actually sign, or it will actually signal that US is right on the border of Russia. And that is why, in order to prevent Ukraine becoming too close to West, the Russia invoked an aggressive move on Ukraine. Now, while doing so, President Trump and US, they have highlighted that Europe, it needs to shoulder greater responsibility when it comes to securing Ukraine. And also US has ruled out any deployment of US peacekeeping force in order to maintain the relations between Russia and Ukraine. So first of all, Trump is highlighting that Europe is on their own, and also US will not send any troops to this continent so as to prevent war from happening and from burgeoning to become a bigger war. Now, Trump is also urging the European allies to grow up and take greater responsibility for their own defenses, because we have seen after the end of World War II, primarily US was responsible for defenses of Europe by construction of NATO directly and indirectly. So that is why now Trump wants Europeans to take care of their own defense needs and rather spend their own money on defense related equipments rather than depending on US. So this also highlights the America First policy that has been adopted by Trump even before when he was the president in his first term. Now the bigger question is this move of rapprochement between US and Russia actually beneficial for Russia? The answer is yes, because Moscow right now is in a weaker position because it is undergoing a war with Ukraine, and this has resulted into outflow of many substantial resources, as Russia is required to spend more money on its war efforts, and that has made both politically and economically Russia a weaker country. So naturally, any more which is looking to settle these two warring parties will be looked at positively from the Russia side. Also, for Putin invoking a new Yalta, it symbolizes that US, it recognizes Russia as actually a great power, and it encourages or it favors role of Russia in shaping of the global affairs. So in terms of geopolitical standing also, Russia sees that US is trying to treat Russia with parity, and that is why it is a great move for Russia. Also, Putin's war in Ukraine, it appears to be less about territorial expansion and more about asserting its influence in the region of Eastern Europe, particularly by establishing a new security order in Europe. Now, when Europe, it tried to bring Ukraine closer to it by making it a member of European Union, making it a member of NATO, this was perceived by Russia as an aggressive move, and that is why it tried to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO by committing a war in Ukraine. And this, by recognizing that actually Europe is responsible for its own defenses, US has highlighted that the need of relationship between Russia and Ukraine should be better. Understood? So this is how such a move is beneficial for Russia. Now, where does actually India comes in the picture? You have to understand, whenever the Ukraine and Russia was in war and Ukraine was actively supported by Western countries, Moscow or Russia had no other option but become closer to China to seek economic as well as military support. Now, this movement or this move of bringing Russia closer to Beijing was detrimental to India and also to US's interest. And that is why once US has actually started reproaching towards Russia, it can affect its ties with Beijing, because now Moscow will not be dependent on China that much. Hence, it shifts the focus of US away from Europe and it addresses the primary challenge of US these days, that is how to counter the developments and expansionism of China. Also, there also a question remains to be seen that whether or not Trump will favor a same outlook towards rapprochement with Taiwan, and whether or not it will seek its potential agreement with Beijing also. So, doing so can actually negatively impact India's relation with China, and this has a positive implication because now US and Russia will become closer and Russia and China will become further away from each other. Whereas India and US, they also needs to find a common ground on how to restructure the global economic system, because currently what we have seen that global economic system such as the relocation of global supply chains into China has actually been detrimental to India's and US's interest, because China has trade deficit with trade surplus with India and US, and because of these trade surplus a significant amount of foreign currencies outflowing from India and US and into China. So as India and US, they want to restructure this global economic system and they want to control these massive trade deficits they have with China, and for that a new global economic regime must be led by democratic countries so as to control the amount of trade that it happens with China. So this is how such kind of a move can signal a positive implication for India, that first of all it brings US and Russia closer and it puts Russia and China away from each other, and also it creates a potential for India to undertake reforms in the global economic system which can be beneficial for trade aspects for both US and India. Understood the concept? Now, this was all for today's discussion. The notes as usual will be available on my Telegram channel, and please remember from tomorrow onwards this session will go live at 4 p.m. every day instead of usual 10 a.m. every day. Now, this is the question for you for practice, and I will be starting for tomorrow's discussion with this solving the practice question. So until then, please keep revising, keep analyzing, and more importantly keep practicing your learning. So I'll see you again tomorrow at 4 p.m. Until then, please have